Well, thank you very much, Megan. That was a very insightful presentation, and I'm sure that those here enjoyed just as much as I did hearing about the voices of children and young people as you have engaged with them throughout your work. I'd now like to invite questions from the audience, and those of you who are interested in asking a question, if you could please state your name and your affiliation before asking your question. And I think we have somebody who's going to be handing around a mic, or would you like me to hand this one around? I can do this. I'll speak loudly, I don't need one.
So you can use that.
I'd like to know if the family courts, what right a child has when, I don't know if you've done studies on abusive, well, it could be men or women, and then the child has to go to that abusive person, and if you happen to say, if you say anything in court, you're seen as you are trying to keep the child from the abusive person. Like there's lots of marriages break up for different things, and I've been to lots of The Wire and Evros with all different types of women from every background, and what comes across is that these abusive people don't change if they have the child or not. The child comes back very young, but talking, and they say all sorts of things, but you have to be quiet because you're seen to be trying to stop the child going to the abusive. So I wondered if you've done any studies that actually show if the abusive person changes even with their own child.
Rachel might be somebody who can answer some of this as well, but can I say this issue about children's treatment in the family court and the outcomes for them comes up constantly in my role, and I've had delegations of children come and talk to me about their experiences, and they have said they felt very disempowered in the process, that they don't believe that they have rights, and that they have not understood what even the decisions were or whether their views were taken into account. So I think it can be a very disempowering place for children, even though the Family Law Act does reference the Child Rights Convention and the need to talk to children, but a lot of judges and a lot of court officials are really scared of kids and don't have the skills to engage with them effectively. And I think that's part of the solution, is getting a better skill set in family court officials and judges so that they can have seriously engaged conversations with kids about their safety and well-being, because the law has been amended over the years to put in much greater protections for women and children, but in practice whether that is the outcome I think is really questionable. Your question about whether people change, I don't know about that. All I know is what kids tell me, that they are often in these situations that they're forced to go to a parent who's abusive to them, and that they weren't listened to in the process of the decision being made. So the more that we can, the Family Law Act, by the way, the Family Law Act is under review. There's a discussion paper out now. If you want to make a contribution, I think it's open till the 8th of November or something like that.
Yes, I think so.
And so this is a great opportunity to actually, if you've got views about the family court and how children can be better protected and supported, this is a good opportunity to get your views made. And Rachel, you might have some views about this. You've done lots of research. They've just done finished a study about the children, getting the voices of children from separated parents.
That's right,
yeah.
yes.
I mean, there's lots separating, the fathers are good, the mothers are good.
Sure.
I'm talking about the abusive person.
Yeah.
They don't change. Controlling.
I'm not sure that our research can help you with that particular aspect of the question, but certainly, as Megan was mentioning, we've recently released some research which focused on children in the separated family context and asking them about the ways in which they would like to be heard, the extent rather to which they would like to be heard and involved in the process. And overwhelmingly, children indicated to us that they would like to be involved in the process, not necessarily making decisions, but involved in that decision-making process. And interestingly as well, we also found that more than 3/4 of the children that we spoke with wanted their parents to listen more to them as well. So I think that was quite interesting. When we actually were going in to talk about services, their engagement with parents as well was quite significant. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that research, but unfortunately the research that I've been involved in doesn't really touch on the aspect of your question relating to whether parents change.
There is...
Like Rosie Batty, she's been trying to change.
Yes. There is some promise, are some programs in the domestic violence space that are showing some promise where the perpetrators are motivated to restore, they are changing their behaviours because they're motivated to restore the relationship with their children. And so I think if you get children's needs and experiences as the focus rather than the warring parents, you've got a lot more chance to get a good and safe outcome for kids. So.
My voice is loud, I don't think I need the mic.
He wants you to have it.
I just wanted to know, what age is a child's voice heard? Like, what constitutes a child?
A child is anybody 0 to 18, so even really young kids can communicate things if you've got them. They can communicate things in different ways. So it mightn't be the traditional way, but it's certainly their movements, their crying, all of those sorts of things. It's really about being in tune with their rights, with them. In terms of their rights, obviously they mature and develop, and some things become more important as like, for instance, their right to education. Although that does start from day one, you know, parents engage in an educational journey with their kids from day one. So just from the beginning of our lives, we all have human rights.
Hi, Ian. Thank you for your time. My name's Whitney from Body Safety Australia. Now, we work with a lot of schools and kindergartens, and most of the parent engagement is quite low. So when you're talking about engaging families, how do you envisage doing that?
Well, I think it would be different for different, different circumstances. It depends where you are, but I think it's important for organisations like, say, early childhood centres or schools to be actively going out and understanding the community from which they're drawing children, really being active in having conversations with the community that they're in and knowing their community. I mean, if you're in an early childhood centre, for instance, how much does that reflect the diversity in that centre, reflect the diversity of the community out there? How active are you going out into local events and shopping centres and the places where people go, like really making that kind of an effort? I think it has to be proactive and it has to be on the organisation, because I know parents get busy and they've got a lot to do and they're driving kids around all the time and a lot of different things. But I'd also encourage parents to step up as well. I think it really is important that they do become part of that accountability piece as well. They're very powerful if they look at what their position is. They're very powerful because they're the ones that are the gatekeepers to whether their kids go to a place or not. But yeah, I mean, it can be an issue. I'm hoping that through the work on the national principles we can develop a conversation with parents as well as organisations and get the message out that they really do need to be active in their kids' lives. Yeah.
Megan, I'd like to know, with regards to out-of-care services, foster care, I know that the service industry is so under-resourced. How do you propose these recommendations, like what kind of government funding, etc., is going in to educate or to
Yeah.
promote safer spaces for children?
Yeah. You know, we put into the child protection system, we put about over $5 billion. So I'm not sure it's a resourcing issue. I think we've just got it round the wrong way. We're putting it all into the end when everything's gone horribly wrong and there's no way back. We really need to be liberating money out of that tertiary end where we're removing children from families, which is highly undesirable, although sometimes we have to do it if the kids are unsafe. We should be really helping families to be safe, great families, and it'll cost us a lot less and we'll get much better outcomes as a society. So turning that around on its head is what a lot of us in this kind of sector are calling for.
Hi, my name's Justine. I work at Children's Court, so we see lots of really great examples of magistrates trying, working really hard with the children and really explaining things and trying to help them to get better and stuff. But I just wanted to ask you about the new laws passed in Victoria about the anti-association laws with children. You know, like they've got with bikers, so I think the police can pass a law and say you have to move on with young kids. So I just wanted to ask what your thoughts are around that. Do you have any power to...
I have no power. Wish I did have power, but I'm not a fan. And there are similar laws across Australia as well, which basically criminalises a human right to associate. And so I'm not a fan of criminalising children's behaviour generally because they're in a developmental phase. Sometimes they do crazy things, and they will, all kids do. And so for me, it's about couldn't the police instead have a relationship with these young people and divert them away from, what they might see as negative associations. That it's really about having a good relationship with young people and having diversionary programs in place rather than, and having the discretion to do that rather than criminalising what's really pretty normal behaviour. I'm saying like sexting and all those sorts of things, you know, we're making kids into criminals for sending photo to one another, you know. We don't need more kids in prison, you know, for that kind of stuff, I don't think.
I wonder if I might indulge in a question, actually. I'm just wondering, when in all of the travels that you've had and speaking with children, if they indicated to you preferred means by which they like to communicate with adults. Did you get any insight in relation to that?
I've just run a poll on ABC Behind the News with Melbourne University, and we got just under 23,000 responses. So I think that shows that's one way of getting to a whole bunch of kids. And that was me asking them what rights were important to them and what they wanted to tell the UN in this report. So I've got all this fabulous data. I haven't analysed all of it, but it's really interesting. So that's one way, you know, for the modern child. They do online polls. But really, kids, as they always have, as human beings, think as well, they always say, you know, you can give us information online, but actually at the end of the day, if you want a deep conversation with us, it needs to be face to face. So it's the same as it always has been. People need human contact and they need to get to know you and to trust you. So, yeah. Excellent. Yeah.
Megan, you mentioned that you're writing a report, and it's Australia's turn to host the major report. Do you feel proud of, obviously proud to represent Australia, but with what we're hearing in the media, so if you go into a school in Melbourne as an example, a primary school, you see a lot of care, you'll see children being treated very, very well. And unfortunately, it seems to be a systemic message coming through that things aren't quite right.
Yeah.
So as an educator, you feel it's very heartbreaking to see that this is happening to some children. And the bigger, on the world stage, how do you think Australia is really being represented?
I think, on the whole, I think Australian children do pretty well, you know, and they say that themselves. So they like, the things they like about Australia is, and these are even really little kids, they like our weather, they like the fact that people don't have guns in the street or at schools, they feel safe here. They like our beaches and our nature. They like going to school, strangely enough. And I must say, I've been to I go into lots of schools and lots of early childhood settings, and people are generally fabulous. And you know a good school the moment you walk in the door. It doesn't have to be a rich school. It's about how the kids present and how they're feeling and how they interact with the teachers. And so on the whole, I think we do pretty well. But there are certain groups of children who don't do so well. And I just think we've got to be cognizant of that and keep on trying to fix things for those kids. So in all those reports that I've done, you know, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids are just overrepresented in every bad figure I can think of, despite the fact that there's a great group of youth coming through that I feel we will be very, very proud of, who are in leadership, are going to take on huge leadership positions. And they're also growing in numbers, so I feel very hopeful. But there is a legacy, generational legacy, that we just need to face and deal with. But also kids from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds are overrepresented in some of those categories too, like in the self-harming statistics, like in the teen parent statistics, and in terms of their association with the youth justice system. So we just need to be keeping on and that's what's really important, to look at those statistics to see if we're actually getting better at them, we're trending down or trending up. And one of my big concerns during this role is it's been really hard for me to get a handle on that information. And so I've been trying to build up the databases that I can access that can tell me whether we're trending in the right direction. Because if you don't measure something, you don't care about it and you don't act on it. So, and unfortunately, the role of this report is to look at where we could be doing better, not to, although I do point out that we're doing okay in plenty of areas. And but you know, I think it's up to all of us, and it's better for us as a society if all kids thrive, and that there aren't these pockets of kids or groups of kids that don't thrive, and that's, you know, the outcomes for a whole lifetime that go with that. So, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but it's sort of a rambling way of saying I think most kids do okay, but we've got these issues we've got to face up to. Yeah, yeah.
Hi, we are parents with kids who has autism. So we just want to know whether there are any special rights that a child with a disability does have in Australia or rather in Victoria, which we could really look into.
Yeah, kids with disabilities have the same rights as every other kid. So hard to get them sometimes, and you have to be a loud advocate for your children, I assume. Yeah.
Especially to do with schools,
Yeah. Yes. No, I actually think we need to be ensuring that our school system is adaptable and can adjust to the needs of kids with autism and other disabilities as well. So I'd like to see inclusive education in all our education systems, because they do have a right to a quality education. That's
schools cannot reject a child.
Schools can do all sorts of things. So under the various education acts of the different states and territories, you know, they can gatekeep and they can expel and they can suspend, mostly for behavioural reasons. They're allowed to do that under various laws. But in terms of international law, the child fundamentally has a right to an education, and that's what a government should be held account to, that they fundamentally have a right, and not just in education, a quality education.
So are these articles really binding on the domestic law?
No.
Is it just
And we don't have a Bill of Rights in Australia. So one of the things I try and do is advocate to incorporate these international treaties and obligations around children into laws. The Family Law Act does have references to the Child Rights Convention. Child Protection Acts have references to the best interests of the child all across Australia, but many other laws don't have references to that. The Early Childhood Quality Framework, it's a law, it has references to the convention as well. So the more we can highlight the role of the convention and get it referenced in some of these legal instruments, the better chance you have of advocating for your child. And if we had a Bill of Rights in Australia, that would be even better, because that's a reference point for people making legal decisions at a very high level.
Megan,
Yeah.
thank you for your presentation. I was wondering if you could comment a bit more about the intersection of the child's rights with the rights of the parents over the child.
Yeah.
And as an example, like for example, we've been talking about safety, and to provide an example, elective surgery, for example, there might be families who believe that a particular surgery is in the best interest of the child, and the medical community might be split on that issue as well, where they might say, yes, this particular surgery is in the best interest, while others say it's not. How do you, how do you form an opinion?
That's a very tricky question, because, you know, our knowledge about things evolves, and our information and research to inform good decisions evolves over time. So something we thought was fine 20 years ago may not be fine now. We've all moved on and we all have a different view. So I think in those sorts of situations you really need as much evidence as you can about what the impact of those decisions are going to be on the child. And that's sometimes why the courts get involved, because people can't make those decisions. And that's why we have legal structures that assist in that. Do you have any comments about that?
I was just going to say the family court actually has what's called parens patriae jurisdiction, and in certain circumstances where decisions can't be made, that may be invoked. So, but you'd hope it wouldn't get to that stage.
Yeah, you want people to talk and talk about what the impact of one way or the other, and as far as possible, engage, if the child, depending on the child's maturity, engage the child in that discussion too. Any more?
Can I
Yes.
ask the last question?
Okay.
Thanks, Megan. I just want to come back to our First Peoples and the children's activity in that space. Are there any learnings or successes that we've been able to transfer across to other developed nations in the way they deal with their First Peoples and the children's? And are there anything that we've learned from them that we're looking to adopt?
I think the big learning is that we need to empower and give control to Indigenous organisations. Without that, they remain passive recipients of everything that happens to them, and really for them to be able to stand up and support their own children. So I think it really is community-controlled organisations is part of the absolute key to this, getting this right. And look, you've got a great example here in Victoria with VACA. Does anybody know VACA?
Yes.
Okay, so they're working sort of as a go-between between the Child Protection Department and Aboriginal communities, and they're restoring kids safely to their communities or to Aboriginal carers, and they're assisting in keeping kids out of the care system as well. And that's a really good example of an Aboriginal controlled organisation that's doing great work. I think VACA should be replicated all around the country myself, so I think it's a fantastic example. Another example is I've been involved with the Burke community since I started. It's like way out in New South Wales. It takes, you know, days to get there. And working with the school and the kids there, and the community as well. And they're doing a project there, again, from that Indigenous grassroots up, called Justice Reinvestment. And it's like this turning this stuff on its head idea again. So they had like a town of 3,000 people, and they had 52 police people picking up kids in the middle of the night, you know, doing a whole lot of stuff they didn't want to be doing. Lots of high levels of incarceration, high levels of domestic violence. And what they've managed to do over a number of years now is get control of the resources going into that town. Lots of resources there, but not for anything that anybody wanted or needed. And all at this tertiary end. Get control of those resources and and reorient them into things like literacy for the adult, literacy courses for the adults, infant health and ear and eye and nose assessments, that nobody's getting. Engaging the families in a transition year going to preschool. So lots of really great things happening and a different use of resources, and that the stats that in that community are really turning around in terms of crime and kids in care and kids in the justice system. So there's another good example is when you let people take control and give them their resources and make decisions about where things should go. I mean, a lot of these, when we looked at the crime statistics, a lot of the youth crime was happening, between 3 and 8 at the evening. And the kids just said, we've got nothing to do. And all they needed was somebody to supervise some touch footy games on the oval, and nobody would do it. And so they put on all these programs that kids didn't want to go to or couldn't get to. And now they've got the footy programs, and so the crime rate's going down. It's just a really simple example of what you can do in a town. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll sit down, Laura.
Thank you again, Megan, for such an engaging discussion this afternoon. And perhaps if I ask everybody to join me in thanking Megan.